I was comfortable in the water. I was comfortable in the water for a black kid from a city I grew up in named Richmond, Virginia. It's not far from the James River and not far from the real slum of Richmond, which is even closer, and it was called Fulton. My experiences with deep water were varied and initially traumatic. On one occasion, I actually slipped into a lake and nearly drowned. On another occasion at a beach, got drifted away by the current and I was almost drowned. But even after these two dramatic events, I would still be comfortable in the water. In the area of Richmond, known as Churchill, I lived in during the 1970s, during the burning hot days of the summer, unrelieved by air conditioners, which we mostly never had, and the few box window fans people bought, there was nothing a person could do to get away from the stifling heat unless they were lucky enough to have a water hose or a friend who had one, but water costs money. But the best thing that you could do was go to the city pool to cool off, and that was a wonderful thing in the summer. Or at some point on the backside of Churchill, the boys' club, they built a pool that was indoors, and it was heated, and you could swim all year round. And I went as often as I could go. I learned nearly every stroke. I learned to hold my breath underwater for long periods of time. I loved splashing. I loved diving. I loved playing in the water. But what really challenged my comfort with the water was my love of the James River. And being in river water is not the same as being in pool water. It tastes funny. It's strange. It has a different texture. It feels more dangerous on your body and in your mouth. The river was less than a mile from my house in Churchill, even closer if you were downhill in the area known as Fulton. I loved the river, and I loved to fish. And any attempt to get to the best fishing locations on the river, I would make them. I'd cross railroad tracks and bridges, utility pipes. I've jumped from slippery rock to slippery rocks. I've waded in rough water. I've got drifted away, fell into rocks, turned upside down, anything just to get to a good little fishing spot. I can't count the number of times I slipped, cracked my head, got tumbled over, managed to get back to shore, and even tested my ability to swim by going from one side of the river to the other, because I was comfortable in the water. And while I was 11 years old and I was a Boy Scout, I was the only scout in a black Boy Scout troop who had the opportunity to earn the full swimmer tag. See, scouts were tested before they were allowed to swim. Each one of us was assigned a tag. One saying non-swimmer, one saying near swimmer, and one was a swimmer. And if you were a swimmer, that meant that you didn't need full supervision to swim in the pool or swim in the lake. And one of the major events of the Boy Scout troop jamboree was the mile swim. Now, without giving it much thought, being the only person in the black troop was even qualified to engage in it and try out for the swimmer merit badge, the mile swim tag, I decided to do it. So I volunteered. Once I began to swim, I endured a great deal of discouragement, comments and insults I was getting from the white scouts who had already given up and had went back into the boat, and they were saying things like, "Come on, man, it's not even worth it. Come on, I would quit if I was you. It's not even worth it. Come on, come on, come on, guy, come on, you want me to stop for you?" Things like that. Now, my sister, she moved to a part of Richmond that could be considered the worst part of town, and that actually was Fulton. But it also presented an opportunity. And what drew me to this area of town was, of course, it was close to the river and it made fishing real easy to me. And my sister lived there, and I often had the opportunity to visit her and go fishing. And one other additional detail, and that was I had a friend who lived in Churchill, and he had friends in that area of Fulton, and they were really into pigeons. A lot of boys at that time at Churchill had and raised pigeons, but the guys in Fulton, large number of them were really into pigeons. So I loved hanging out with these guys. Now, these group of boys who were into pigeons that I had gotten to know, they knew everything about pigeons. but they weren't exactly the kind of friends that somebody like me would meet or they would even trust. In that they had extensive knowledge and passions for pigeons. I loved that about them. But what they all seemed to also have in common is they seemed to be far from doing anything at all at school. Many of the older boys had dropped out. Most of them hadn't completed middle school. They were thieves, stick-up artists, molesters, pedophiles. Now understanding those two terms, molester and pedophile, didn't exist in my vernacular in that era. Now, not knowing how old one needs to be considered a molester, I didn't have any clinical definition. I could only think of them as guys who would likely want to fuck you in your ass. Now, I can state the things that I witnessed these boys do, and in of itself, they gave me reasons to fear. I'd heard that they had ejaculation contests. You know, jacking off. I'd heard that they raped a boy and an old lady. I'd heard them talk about drowning a boy. I'd heard them joke about these things. I heard them talking about having sex with people in the ass. I'd seen them play like they were humping the smaller boys in the butt. But only once did I hear a scream or a moan or anything that made me think that something had actually happened. And I'm certain that they were raping or forcing sex on one of the smaller boys in an abandoned house while the rest of us just waited outside and looked around and talked about nothing. And many were the things I had heard, but little had I actually seen. I ignored what I feared to know, and I focused on the positive aspects of association with those who love birds as much as me, despite their strange and what I would call nasty behavior. I loved pigeons, and I loved fishing in the water. It was my friend. I was comfortable in the water. I remember the day I was asked by the guys about the best place on the river to fish so close to Fulton, and I just lost it. Because I knew the best spot. Just talking about it got me excited and completely unaware of anything else around me. I love talking about fishing, about this place we were walking to, the abandoned buildings, there's old history, how it's all grassy and it's growing up through the asphalt, and it was an old abandoned dock that hadn't been used in about 40 years. It was dilapidated. I was so engrossed into talking about fishing, I didn't even pay any attention to the fact that nobody was saying anything to me. It was actually silent. And that loud silence actually made me stop and turn around. I was almost about to walk into the water. I was walking so quickly, and I stopped and turned around. And I looked, and I was stunned and shocked to see that one of the boys, one of the 7 boys, had actually taken out his erect penis, and he was saying to me, "Come on, we're gonna peg you in your ass. Now, come on now, you don't have to get in that water." Another one of the boys chimed in, "Yeah, bring your ass back. We don't want to get wet. Come on now." I said loudly, "No!" And I trembled. All the fear my mind could possess at one time. Being sodomized. And that word sodomy didn't exist in my era in that time. I didn't want to be fucked in the ass and beaten and drowned to death. As I walked backwards into the water, some of the boys laughed and a few of the smaller boys said nothing. But I could see that fearful look on their face. Maybe they knew what was going to happen. I heard one of the boys say, "Come on, man, let's go. His ass is scared." But he was generally ignored. The boy who had his penis out tried to reach out for me, but he didn't want to get wet. It was as if he was a lot more afraid of that water than me. I pushed back into the deep moving water as fast as I could and then started to yell, "No, stop!" And as I moved further back into the deepening water and it was getting colder, I could feel the current starting to drift me downstream. The boys looked horrified and they just ran off. I managed to float down about 100 yards down the river closer to the bank as the water was moving fast and the branches were slapping me in the face. My knee was being banged. I didn't want to yell or scream or yell out anything because I didn't want them to find me. I went more than 100 yards before I managed to grab hold to a branch and get a hold and get back on the bank. I was muddy and terrified and cold, and trembling, scared, and cried. And I was hiding in the bushes, and every little sound that I heard, I would stop. I wouldn't move. I was thinking it was them that were coming back. And after about an hour of just misery, I managed to sneak out and I walked across this long courtyard, back into the city streets, back up to the top of the hill, back into the neighborhood, muddy, wet from head to toe. Few people noticed me, and a guy looked at me, and I was so wet and nasty, and just for a joke, he yelled out, "Hey, you must like the water, boy, huh? You must hate it. You need a bath? You scared of water?" I said, "No, I'm comfortable in the water."